Point of order, Stephen Kerr.
Presiding Officer, on a point of order, I would seek your direction and some information from you, if I might. This morning, just after 11:10, Colin Mackay of STV News put a post on X announcing that oil refining had ceased at Grangemouth, marking the end of oil refining in Scotland. This development was not announced by the company. It was not announced to Parliament. It didn't come in a ministerial statement, not in a debate, but it came in a media leak. And I feel that is a discourtesy to this Parliament. It is deeply disrespectful to treat the workers, families and communities who rely on Grangemouth, and I would go as far as to say that it's quite an insulting way to learn such important news. So, Presiding Officer, I am aware that a request has already been made through the Parliamentary Bureau, which met at noon, for both a statement and a debate on the future of Grangemouth. However, this is clearly a fast-moving situation, and in the light of the information that only came to light after 11 o'clock, too late for an urgent question, I wish to ask you whether you've had any approach from the Scottish Government to provide a statement either this afternoon, later or tomorrow on this critical matter. I think it's vital that Parliament receives an immediate update from ministers. In particular, there are important questions that require to be answered. Has Petroineos given any firm commitment to the redevelopment of the Grangemouth site? Has the company indicated any willingness to invest in any of the 9 potential projects identified? And does the Scottish Government still view Petroineos, in the light of this leaked news, as a company acting in good faith with respect to the future of the site? So, Presiding Officer, the people of Grangemouth deserve clarity, Parliament deserves respect, and the Government must be held accountable. So I'd be very grateful for your guidance on how a statement could be secured as a matter of urgency, if not today, then tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr Kerr. I am not aware from whence the information reported on social media came from, so I cannot comment on that. But I will say that the Minister for Parliamentary Business is liaising with business managers with regards to a statement being put to this chamber in the immediate future. That is my understanding. Thank you. Point of order, Neil Bibby.
Presiding Officer, I rise to make a point of order. As you will be aware, on Thursday, 24th of April, I and other members of this Parliament were in attendance for education portfolio questions. Members were there to ask questions on school violence, vaping in schools, parents unable to access childcare, job losses at universities, teacher recruitment and care experienced children. All important and serious matters for our children and young people, parents and those working in our schools, colleges and universities. While I and many other members were in attendance, unfortunately, the Cabinet Secretary for Education was not here to address those important questions. For context, Presiding Officer, this question time session took place hours after a serious incident at an Aberdeen school and in the week before pupils start their SQA exams. A spokesperson for the Cabinet Secretary told the press that she had a mix of government and party meetings and events in the course of the day. A source later confirmed the non-attendance here was not due to government business. No extenuating circumstances, justifiable reasons or apology has been given for this no-show. Not only is that a bad example to set Scotland's school children by skipping education questions, which presumably would have been in the ministerial diary for weeks, if not months. Worse than that, it appears that Jenny Grove may have prioritised party interests over her responsibilities to Parliament and, by extension, the country. Presiding Officer, I make this point of order because it is important the Cabinet Secretary is afforded the opportunity to clarify her reasons for not attending her own portfolio questions, alongside making available her diary and any changes to it so we can ascertain when government and party business took place and where. Failure to do this can only create the impression that the Cabinet Secretary has been discourteous and disrespectful to this Parliament. The Nolan principles of public life are clear. They underpin our standing orders and also the Ministerial Code, which states at point 1.4 section D on the accountability principle that holders of public office are accountable for their decisions and actions and must submit themselves to whatever scrutiny is necessary to ensure this. Presiding Officer, can you confirm that under Rules 13.1 and 13.2 that the Cabinet Secretary can be afforded an opportunity to make a statement in order to issue a clarification alongside the publication of a diary, or indeed make an apology to you, Presiding Officer, and the Chamber, because the Parliament cannot and should not simply accept the situation of ministers putting party interests before those of the country?
Thank you, Mr Bibby. I would suggest that our standing orders advise that oral questions may be answered by any member of the Scottish Government or junior ministers, that it is a matter for the Scottish Government who they decide to put forward for a particular session, and I would also say that the ministerial code in the first instance is a matter for the First Minister. We will now move on to our next item of business. Point of order, Sandesh Gulhani.
Presiding Officer, the business of Parliament is to look after our citizens and, most importantly, our children. Last week, I asked during Education Portfolio Questions what support is available to teachers facing violence, a vital question following the stabbing of a 12-year-old girl. Shocked and terrified students across this country, not just Aberdeen, parents terrified. Yet the Cabinet Secretary, at that time, chose to attend an SNP photo call rather than attend and answer questions in this chamber. Presiding Officer, this is not a diary clash, it's a deliberate choice. Violence in schools is rising, pupils and staff are scared, and this deserved the full attention of the Education Secretary. So I asked for the Cabinet Secretary to apologise to students, parents and teachers for a failure to answer these questions. And will the presiding officer be able to investigate the circumstances surrounding Jenny Gilruth feeling stabbings in schools are not important enough for her to appear before Parliament? And what recourse does the presiding officer herself have to address this issue?
Thank you, Dr Gulhani. As presiding officer, obviously it is my role to enforce the standing orders of this Parliament, and with regards to the particular instance the member refers, Rule 13.7.1 advises that oral questions can be answered by any member of the Scottish Government or junior minister. So again, I would say that it is a matter for the Government themselves, and as I've said previously, the ministerial code is a matter for the First Minister in the first instance. Thank you. We'll now move on to topical questions, and at question number 1 I call Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the interim update from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission on the practical implications of the recent UK Supreme Court judgment in 4 Women versus the Scottish Ministers.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville.
The Scottish Government accepts the judgment of the Supreme Court and work has begun on implementation. I have asked the Permanent Secretary to stand up a short-life working group to ensure support and consistency across Government on this work. Following publication of the EHRC's update late on Friday evening, I wrote to the EHRC to confirm that they agree that no public body, service provider or other association should issue specific guidance at this point in time before the EHRC Code of Practice and Guidance is finalised. As the enforcer and regulator of the Equality Act, all organisations must consider and comply with the EHRC revised Code of Practice and Guidance to ensure that there is a consistent and clear understanding of the correct application of the law for all involved in this complex area.
Tess White.
Cabinet Secretary, the EHRC's update was crystal clear, and there's a vacuum right now that biological males should not be permitted to use the women's facilities in workplaces or public buildings, like schools and hospitals. This is compulsory. It's the law, as the Supreme Court ruling clearly laid out. So has the EHRC. Yet John Swinney yesterday said that public bodies should wait for the legal certainty of full EHRC guidance in June before implementing new policies. The Scottish Government, Presiding Officer, is dragging its feet. Will the Scottish Government now finally stop kicking the can down the road and remove biological men from women's spaces across the public sector, yes or no?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as I've already mentioned, work has already begun right across government to consider the implications of this judgment in areas such as legislation, guidance and cost. And that working group led by the Permanent Secretary has been established to take this work forward. Now, we did wish to meet at a ministerial level with the EHRC to ensure our work and theirs can operate well together. Unfortunately, the EHRC cancelled that meeting at short notice, and we are keen within the government to meet with them both at ministerial and official level as a matter of urgency. I have made clear to the EHRC that I am happy to meet them any time. I understand officials are due to meet them this week. But in the meantime, this government is already continuing with its work to implement the Supreme Court judgment.
Tess White.
Presiding Officer, the Cabinet Secretary talks about that meeting. We all know the truth behind that meeting. Last week, the First Minister stood up in this chamber and said that he would respect the rule of law and abide by the Supreme Court's ruling. This morning, SNP MSPs voted to keep Green MSP Maggie Chapman as Deputy Convener of the Equalities, Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee after she shockingly attacked the highest court in the land following the verdict. Maggie Chapman has shown contempt for the rule of law and has brought the committee into disrepute when it should be scrutinising the implementation of the Supreme Court's judgment. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the SNP's decision to keep her in post on the committee risks undermining trust in Holyrood itself? Yes or no?
Cabinet Secretary.
The First Minister and indeed I, in my statement last week, made absolutely clear that we respect the rule of law and we respect the judgment of the Supreme Court. And it is important that everyone, Presiding Officer, in this matter is aware of their tone and their temperament during this. I would say, Presiding Officer, on this and indeed on other issues, I think it is very important that Scottish ministers do not take a view on what happens within a parliamentary committee. I think that is inappropriate for government ministers to opine in such a manner.
Thank you. And I call Claire Haughey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what engagement the Scottish Government has had with the EHRC on the UK Supreme Court ruling and when it will next meet the EHRC to discuss this further?
Cabinet Secretary.
As I mentioned previously, the Scottish Government had a scheduled meeting with the EHRC for Thursday the 24th of April, which the First Minister referred to during First Minister's questions. Unfortunately, at short notice, the EHRC cancelled that meeting based on not yet having met or discussed the judgment with the UK Government. I'm of course extremely disappointed by their decision to do so, and I stand ready to meet them at their earliest convenience. In the meantime, Scottish Government officials will meet with the EHRC this week, and of course Scottish Government officials are continuing their dialogue with UK Government officials. My letter to UK Government ministers asking also for an urgent meeting to discuss the shared interest on this matter, I'm awaiting a reply to.
Patrick Harvie.
Those who have been trying to undo decades of progress on LGBT people's human rights and inclusion of society may be keen to carry on doing more as quickly as they can. But does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that the extraordinary level...
Point of order, Tess White.
Presiding Officer, this bears no relation to the question in hand in this topical. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms White, but I am chairing this meeting of Parliament and I will do that as I see fit. Patrick Harvie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was about to ask if the Cabinet Secretary acknowledges the extraordinary degree of fear and anxiety that is being caused to the trans community around the country as a result of this late Friday night update from the EHRC. I've heard from people who the next morning weren't even sure if they should go to work or not because they didn't know if they'd be able to do something as simple as go to the toilet. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the UK is now at risk of breaching trans people's human rights, just as it did decades ago before the GRA was in place, as well as breaching the freedom of the wider LGBT community to organise in the inclusive manner that the vast majority of our members wish to? And when the Government meets with the EHRC, will the Cabinet Secretary make it crystal clear that it is unacceptable to see decades of progress on equality and human rights rolled back in this way?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Patrick Harvey is quite right to point to the fact that this update, and it is an update, not guidance, Presiding Officer, but the update from the EHRC has caused real fear and concern within the trans community. And I think particularly that it landed on a Friday evening did add to that. I have read and watched with interest, for example, the comments made by Ros Foy, where she's actually quoted as saying we're going to have to make sure that we protect all parties' rights in this, and we actually have to find a way forward that makes sure we have some sort of provision for trans men and women in our public bodies and in our institutions. And I would agree with the sentiment behind that. I think it is very important that we recognise that there was that fear and concern, and remains that fear and concern because of the EHRC update. And any concerns that individuals have with the EHRC is for the body responsible for regulating and enforcing that Equality Act, and with their update that they themselves have put out.
Thank you. We do not have a lot of spare time this afternoon, so the more concise members can be, the better, in order to accommodate more members. I call Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the EHRC's interim guidance, which provides clarity on the Supreme Court's judgment. The law is clear, and the SNP have no more excuses. Cabinet Secretary, will you challenge any lobby groups or organisations who fail to accurately implement the interim guidance from the EHRC? And can you provide assurance that no taxpayers' money will go to any groups or organisations that do not follow this interim guidance?
Cabinet Secretary. On a point of order, Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I note that the member is interested in accuracy. Is it in order for members to misrepresent this late-night interim update as guidance? Guidance has statutory meaning. This is not guidance. That is an inaccurate statement.
Mr Harvey, as I previously said, I am chairing this meeting and I will intervene where I feel that is required. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think it is appropriate for the member to reflect on using the exact terminology that the EHRC have used themselves. And this is an update and it is not guidance. There are direct relevant requirements that are brought forward by guidance being implemented, and this is not guidance, it is an update. In saying all that, Presiding Officer, I think it is exceptionally important that, of course, as well as accepting the Supreme Court judgment, we accept the rule of law in this case. And that is exactly why the Scottish Government is continuing its work on the implementation of the Supreme Court judgment. And I look forward to discussing this with EHRC at their earliest convenience.
Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Supreme Court have clarified the law, and this is an absolute when compared to guidance, interim or otherwise. So to wait until summer to tell public bodies they must act where they are able to do so seems highly risky, given the absolute clarity of the Supreme Court's 88-page judgment. So what assessment has the Scottish Government made of the risk of further court actions being initiated in the interim and the cost of the public purse therein?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I've said on a number of occasions, Presiding Officer, the work has already begun right across government on the implementation of this in terms of assessing a review of guidance, of policy and practice and of legislation. And that work is exceptionally important for this. I give an example, Presiding Officer, of the challenges the government faces during this. Just as the Scottish Government was not aware of the update from the EHRC, I do not know whether there are any other updates planned by the EHRC before they produce their guidance during the summer. And that lack of knowledge about what may or may not happen within the EHRC is exactly the type of clarity that we need as we attempt to move forward at speed on this issue.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Prison Service has confirmed it will not immediately change its policy on housing trans women in the female estate, and instead is considering any potential impact that the Supreme Court's decision has on existing policies. However, the Supreme Court's judgment made the law very clear. Sex means biological sex. Therefore, will the Cabinet Secretary ensure that the SPS takes immediate action to remove any biological men from the women's estate?
Cabinet Secretary.
As I've said, Presiding Officer, consideration is being given across government and by our public services, including the Scottish Prison Service, on the outcome of the Supreme Court judgment and on the HRC interim update. Under the present policy, no transgender women with a history of violence against women and girls who present as a risk to women are placed in the female estate.
Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, paragraph 24 of the Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations of 1992 provides as follows. Suitable and sufficient facilities shall be provided for any person in the workplace to change clothing, and those facilities shall not be suitable unless they include separate facilities for men and women where necessary by reason of propriety, and the facilities are easily accessible of sufficient capacity and provided with seating. I understand, Presiding Officer, that all 14 regional health boards are reported to be in breach of this absolutely crystal clear duty. And I've raised this twice or three times in the Chamber before without comment with the Scottish Government, will they now order, under their statutory powers of the National Health Service Scotland Act, every health board to comply with the law without further delay?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I've already made reference to the fact that the Scottish Government expects all public bodies and agencies to act within the law and obey the rule of law, and that particularly includes the Supreme Court judgment. But it also, obviously, Presiding Officer, includes any other regulations, and that includes the 1992 regulations.
And Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary says she wants to bring clarity to this debate. So following on from the question from Sharon Dowie, can the Cabinet Secretary tell us how many biological men are currently incarcerated in the female prison estate in Scotland? And what is the issue with dealing with this right now? The judgment was very clear. There should no longer be biological men in the female prison estate, and the Scottish Government should deal with it immediately.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I referred to some of the information on that in my previous answer, Presiding Officer, but the SPS report the total number of transgender people in custody on a quarterly basis. Latest figures show that there are a total of 16 transgender women and transgender men located across both the male and female estates, and that represents less than 0.5% of the total prison population in Scotland.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions.
Question 2.
Oh. My apologies. We're clearly behind schedule, but that's not the way to get us back on track. We move to question 2, and I call Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking to ensure greater access to affordable early years provision in light of reports of the rising cost of childcare for families with children under the age of 3.
Minister Natalie Dawn-Innes.
Scotland is the only part of the UK to offer 1140 hours a year of funded ELC to all 3- and 4-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds, regardless of their parents' working status, putting children first. We've invested around £1 billion every year in funded early learning and childcare since 2021 because this is fundamental to giving children the best start in life. The Scottish Government also continues to work with local authorities to reach more young children through maximising uptake of our ELC offer for eligible 2s. The 25-26 budget also provides up to an additional £8 million investment for work with our early adopter communities in 6 local authorities to build our understanding of what models of childcare work best for children and their families.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for that response. But of course, the Coram Childcare Survey 2025 shows that the childcare costs for under 3s in Scotland has risen by 7% to approximately £122 per week, or £6,300 per year. And meanwhile, fewer than 1 in 3 Scottish councils report having enough childcare places to meet the demand for the 3- and 4-year-olds that the Minister talks about. Only 7% have adequate provision for older children. So does the Minister accept that after years of promises, this government is failing to deliver affordable, accessible childcare, and that Scotland's young families are being let down?
Minister.
I would not accept that. I do accept that in the current climate, families are finding things difficult, and of course childcare costs are a part of that. But in Scotland, we are increasing our childcare offer and providing for families. As I've said in my first answer, we continue to work with local authorities to reach more young children through maximising uptake of our ELC offer for 2-year-olds. Work in our early adopter communities continues to expand, and that has recently included involvement with younger children and the needs of those families. And we are taking a range of other actions in relation to childcare in Scotland. I will always continue to look for ways to support families, but I believe our offer in Scotland is positive for children and families.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful for that answer. And I'm disappointed that the government aren't accepting the challenge that exists, that over the last 18 years, childcare costs have risen by nearly 50%, and fewer than 1 in 3 councils have enough places to meet demand. So in the light of the response from the Minister, when will all councils be able to meet the demand for 3+ years for children's childcare? Minister.
We're continuing to work with local authorities to ensure that our childcare offer is what families and children need, and I think I've laid that out in my previous answers. I've laid out what the Scottish Government are doing and my willingness to continue to listen to both members and to families and to providers in relation to what they require. But I think that the member needs to reflect on some of the decisions made by his own UK Government colleagues and the impact that they will have on families. The UK Labour Government's increase to national insurance contributions is creating a financial burden on early years providers in Scotland, and there is a depth of concern across the childcare sector on these changes. With a lack of support from the UK Government, it's likely that these providers will have to pass costs on to families because of these decisions. So I find the response from the member quite difficult in relation to some of the decisions that his own UK Government colleagues are making.
Thank you. I call Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Of course, the SNP Government increased the provision of free childcare from 412 hours a year under Labour to 1,114 now. Can the Minister explain, though, the logic in providing childcare for non-working parents of 2-year-olds who clearly have more time to spend with their children than parents who work? It's obviously a disincentive to move into or stay in the workforce, and only 59% of non-working parents currently take up the offer of a place.
Minister.
As I said in my response to Mr Whitfield, I appreciate that costs on families are increasing at this current time, and I do want to do what we can to support that, appreciating, of course, that childcare costs are an issue in relation to that. In Scotland, we are ensuring that our offer is for all families, for children, specifically for children living in poverty, because for children aged under 3, the picture is quite different, and how much they benefit from ELC is determined by crucial factors such as their family background, what age they start in ELC, the quality of services and the balance of hours that they spend between care at home and in ELC settings. I want to ensure equity for all of Scotland's children and not further enshrine some of the inequalities that exist. And I believe that that is what our offer in Scotland does.
Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Nurseries are essential to ensure that children get the best start in life and helping parents return to work. But the refusal by this SNP Government to properly address the issues with their funding model has now come back on them, and it's working families who are suffering. So in England, funding is available for working families with children from 9 months old. So my question is very simple. When will the Scottish Government take swift and decisive action here, change course and support Scottish working families?
Minister.
I've been very clear that our offer in Scotland is to ensure equity for all of Scotland's children. In relation to the issues that the member raises around, I think it was funding for providers, I've been very clear paying sustainable rates to funded providers is absolutely critical to ensuring that childcare is affordable for families, and that private, voluntary and independent providers do not have to pass on any extra costs to families. That's why in 25-26 we're making a further £9.7 million available to enable childcare staff delivering funded hours in the private and third sectors to continue to be paid at least the real living wage, the only country in the United Kingdom to do so. I am also taking on further work in relation to that, the sustainable rates in relation to our cost collection exercise with the Diffley Partnership. So there are a range of different actions being taken to improve costs for families, to improve our offer in Scotland, and I will continue to look for ways to improve that further.
Willie Rennie.
But none of those actions are working, are they? The reason why the under-3 rates are so high and increasing is because the government is underfunding private nurseries, voluntary nurseries, independent nurseries for the provision of the 1140 hours. Why can't the Minister understand that it's her policy that's costing parents so much?
Minister.
I regularly meet with childcare providers. I regularly meet with families to discuss these exact issues. I am not blind to the issues that are faced by our providers. That is why I am taking further action, as I've listed out some of the actions, and I've spoken before with Mr Rennie about that cost collection exercise, which I think is going to be really key in terms of understanding the rates that need to be paid to providers. And I've been very clear that I want as much involvement from our providers as possible. I've actually received really positive feedback about this, and I think it's difficult to say that that's not working when this work is not complete yet, and I am positive about the outcomes for it.
Thank you. I'll have to draw topical questions to a close at this point, and we'll move on to the next item of business in a few moments. My apologies to those who have not been able to get in this afternoon.